The studio lights flared. Pete Hegseth smirked as he adjusted his tie, already basking in the anticipation of what he thought would be a slam dunk segment. Across from him sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, composed, sharp-eyed, and silent. For a moment, he mistook her stillness for hesitation. Big mistake. Before we begin, Pete leaned forward, his grin widening. Just curious, Congresswoman, remind us again what makes you qualified to speak on national security? The question wasn't innocent, it was a shot. A rehearsed, condescending jab meant to go viral on his terms. Jasmine blinked once. That was all. I hold a law degree. I've defended people's rights in courtrooms you've never stepped foot in. And unlike you, Pete, I didn't get my job by parroting cable news scripts, I earned it, every step of the way. The air thinned. Pete let out a low chuckle, but his posture betrayed him. He shifted, suddenly less certain. Okay, sure, but law school? Doesn't exactly make someone an expert in warfare or border policy. That was it. Jasmine leaned forward, her tone controlled and cutting. You served in the military, Pete, and that's honorable. But let's be clear, your battlefield is now a teleprompter. Mine? The Constitution. You mock my credentials while ignoring the fact that I've spent my career upholding the very rights you claim to defend on TV. The panel froze. Even the host went silent. What was meant to be a character takedown turned into a masterclass in restraint and rebuttal. Jasmine hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't needed to. She had buried him, with one line. The clip had barely been posted before it exploded online. Within hours, Jasmine buried him was trending, first on Twitter, then across every major platform. Pete Hegseth's team rushed to reframe the moment as spirited debate, but the internet had already made its judgment. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win that exchange, she dismantled a narrative. And she did it calmly. Precisely. With surgical precision. The next evening, Jasmine was invited to MSNBC for a follow-up. The host leaned in, eyebrows raised. You knew what he was trying to do, didn't you? Jasmine gave a knowing smile. Of course. It's always the same playbook, question the black woman's credentials, try to get a soundbite, hope she gets flustered. But this time? The playbook backfired. Meanwhile, Pete tried damage control on Fox News. She took it personally, he claimed, chuckling awkwardly. It was just a question. But his usual confidence was cracked. Even his co-hosts didn't jump to his defense. Behind the scenes, producers debated inviting Jasmine back, for ratings. They knew her name now meant engagement. But she wasn't interested in playing their game. Because for Jasmine, this wasn't about viral moments. It was about setting the record straight, again and again, if necessary. You don't get to mock a black woman's education, her experience, and her intelligence, then hide behind, just asking questions, she told CNN later that week. We've seen that tactic before. It's lazy. It's cowardly. Pete stayed silent after that. No follow-up. No apology. Just silence. And in that silence, Jasmine's words echoed even louder. By the time the weekend hit, clips of the confrontation had gone international. BBC, Al Jazeera, even France 24, all ran segments asking the same thing: who is Jasmine Crockett, and why did her words shake American media to its core? Back in Texas, Jasmine was unfazed. At a local town hall in Dallas, she addressed a crowd of students, activists, and voters. Someone in the back shouted, "You cooked him, Jasmine." Laughter rippled through the room, but she raised her hand gently. "I didn't come here to cook anyone," she said, voice steady. "I came here to remind folks that facts still matter. That credentials mean something. And that condescension from a TV host doesn't erase a single minute of the work we've done." Applause thundered. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth was being scrutinized by his own network's insiders. A leaked email from a senior producer said, "Why does this keep happening with our guests? First Cortez, then Bowman, now Crockett. She made him look unprepared. He was. And that's what truly burned him. Because when Pete mocked Jasmine's education on national TV, he hadn't expected her to reply with specifics, the cases she'd argued, the legislation she'd fought for, the hours logged in courtrooms, not studios. One clip captured it best. Pete had interrupted her, saying, "You don't really believe you know the Constitution better than someone who's studied national security, right?" Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned in and said, "I don't just believe it, Pete, I know it. And if you'd done your homework, you'd know I've written legislation your party tried to copy and claim." The pause after that? It was loud enough to rattle cable news. And America listened, not because she yelled, but because she didn't have to. Fox News wasn't built for moments like this. After Jasmine's clip lit up every social feed in America, Pete's producers scrambled. They booked constitutional experts, former JAG attorneys, and even a retired judge to reframe the narrative. But none of them could erase the smirk that Pete wore when he tried to belittle her. Or the steel in Jasmine's voice when she responded. Jasmine didn't need backup. She was the backup. That Monday morning, she walked into the House Judiciary Committee with the same calm as always. Her team urged her to ride the viral wave, maybe release a statement. She refused. "This isn't about Pete," she told her aides. "It's about a system that treats our knowledge as disposable, until we force them to respect it." Still, the headlines wrote themselves. Crockett ends Hegseth's credibility in under 60 seconds. The line that shut Pete up and opened a conversation. But it wasn't just a soundbite anymore, it was a shift. Black women across the country posted videos of their own credentials. Lawyers, teachers, engineers. All of them using the hashtag Jasmine was ready. Pete tried to laugh it off on his next segment. "Well, I guess I got schooled, huh?" he said with a forced grin. But even his co-hosts weren't laughing. The network had edited out Jasmine's line about writing legislation your party copied. But it didn't matter. The uncut version had already made its rounds. And there was no unseeing it. In one exchange, Jasmine had dismantled not just Pete's arrogance, but the entire framework that allowed it to thrive. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout. She spoke like someone who knew the room didn't give her permission, but she was going to speak anyway. And when she did, she didn't just burn the bridge. She rebuilt it, on her terms. Pete didn't show up for his next live panel. He claimed scheduling conflicts, but behind closed doors, the truth was clear, he was rattled. Not just by the backlash, but by how easily Jasmine flipped the room. And he wasn't alone. At a high-profile donor dinner that week, whispers floated between champagne glasses. "She's not just sharp," one political strategist said. "She's dangerous. Because she doesn't need us to give her a platform, she builds her own." And that terrified them. Because for years, people like Pete thrived on control. They curated the conversation. But Jasmine? She hijacked it with one sentence. And worse, she did it with a calm they couldn't provoke. Back in Texas, Jasmine was hosting a legal workshop for young black women. A law student asked, "How did you stay so composed when Pete disrespected you like that?" Jasmine smiled. "Because I've been disrespected before. Pete just happened to do it on camera." The crowd nodded in silent understanding. She continued. The goal was never to humiliate him. The goal was to show the world what it looks like when preparation meets arrogance. When facts meet fiction. And when a woman who's been counted out, stops asking for permission. Meanwhile, Pete's clip became training material in political media courses across the country. Professors paused at the moment Jasmine delivered her final blow. Right there, they'd say. That's when control shifted. But what really sealed Pete's fate? It wasn't Jasmine's resume. It was that she didn't try to defend it. She made him justify his. And he couldn't. Because deep down, everyone watching knew the truth. Pete brought a smirk to a courtroom, and Jasmine brought the fire of every woman who ever had to prove it twice. This wasn't a debate. It was a reckoning. They called it the silence that echoed. In the days following the exchange, conservative media scrambled. Some tried editing the clip. Others cut her off mid-sentence in replays, trying to soften the blow. But the internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't do edits. The full video of Jasmine's takedown was everywhere: Reddit, TikTok, Instagram Reels. Hashtags like #OneLineBurial and #Jasmine vs Pete trended for 72 hours straight. What made it viral wasn't just the burn. It was the pause. Right after Jasmine delivered her line, Pete blinked, twice. His lips moved, but nothing came out. And in that 6 seconds of silence, the audience heard everything he couldn't say. That silence became a meme. But for Jasmine, it wasn't a joke. It was strategy. On a radio interview with Angela Rye, Jasmine explained. Pete wasn't my target. The mindset behind Pete was. That smug assumption that experience doesn't matter if you look like me. That credentials need a second opinion when you're a black woman. I didn't bury Pete. I buried that mentality. Angela paused. And you did it without raising your voice. Jasmine responded, because I didn't need to. That's the power they never calculate for. Behind the scenes, Fox producers began rethinking guest pairings. Don't bring Crockett on unless you're ready, one warned. She doesn't play the same game. In Congress, Jasmine's name was whispered in news circles. Allies smiled. Rivals braced. The woman who'd been underestimated had now become unavoidable. Pete? He posted a vague tweet. Respectful dialogue matters. But the comments lit up like wildfire. Then maybe start with respect. She taught. You flinched. One line. And you vanished. By week's end, Pete's credibility wasn't just bruised, it was redefined. And Jasmine? She didn't just win a debate. She altered the rules. Pete Hegseth thought time would do the healing. That America would forget the clip, move on, spin to the next headline. But Jasmine's response didn't just sting, it stuck. And worse, it evolved. It became a symbol. On morning shows, pundits stopped asking if Jasmine was qualified, they started asking if anyone else could even keep up with her. On campuses, law professors quoted her line verbatim. Students knew it not as a moment, but a turning point. Even inside conservative circles, something shifted. Behind closed doors, Pete's colleagues were blunt. She made you look like you brought flashcards to a chess match. Still, Pete tried to fight back. He booked an interview on a sympathetic podcast. He smiled and said, it was taken out of context. But the host, caught in the tide of public pressure, asked, then what was the context? Because it looked like you got checked in real time. Pete's smile cracked. Meanwhile, Jasmine didn't bask in the attention, she used it. At a town hall in Atlanta, she walked to the mic without notes. Let me be clear, she began. This wasn't about pride. This was about proof. Proof that we still live in a country where some folks assume knowledge must come with a necktie, or a lighter skin tone. The crowd rose to their feet. She continued, voice calm but cutting. You can mock my education, you can scoff at my credentials, but you cannot undo the facts. And every time you try, I'll be there. Ready. With truth in one hand, and fire in the other. A standing ovation roared behind her. Somewhere in a green room, Pete watched the clip on his phone. Alone. No camera. No script. Just him, and the realization that the game had changed, and Jasmine Crockett was no longer a guest on their stage. She was the standard. And the silence from his end? It wasn't strategy anymore. It was surrender. They tried to pivot. Fox News ran a segment titled, "Was Jasmine Crockett Too Emotional?" Another anchor smirked, "She memorized one line, now suddenly she's a genius." But the viewers weren't buying it. Social media had already taken sides. And Jasmine's side? It wasn't just louder, it was sharper. Clips of her town hall speech went viral. One tweet read, "Jasmine didn't just defend herself, she dismantled an entire narrative." In one breath. Pete Hegseth, meanwhile, was trapped in a media spiral. The more he tried to walk it back, the worse it looked. His every word seemed defensive. Small. And then Jasmine struck again, without saying a word. She released a thread of screenshots, state bar certifications, court victories, civil rights cases she'd led. Real work. Real receipts. She captioned it simply, "Since credentials were questioned, receipts below." It blew up. Journalists picked it up. Activists shared it. Students printed it. Even Pete's co-hosts looked away the next time her name came up. At a policy panel days later, Jasmine sat between two seasoned legal scholars. When asked about legal reform, she didn't grandstand. She explained. Clearly. Cleanly. Compellingly. After the panel, a moderator whispered, "Congresswoman Crockett, that was textbook." She smiled gently and replied, "That's funny, Pete thought I didn't read any." And just like that, the audience erupted into laughter. Not mocking. Not cruel. Just truth catching fire. Meanwhile, Pete avoided the press. The man who once mocked Jasmine's intellect had become a cautionary tale in real time. It wasn't just a political skirmish anymore, it was a reckoning. A shift in who gets to define smart, who owns the room, who leads the future. And Jasmine? She wasn't fighting to be heard anymore. She was the voice. Pete Hegseth had gone quiet. No more snarky tweets. No more smirking segments. Just silence. The kind of silence that screams defeat. But Jasmine? She wasn't done. At a university law symposium streamed nationwide, Jasmine Crockett took the podium. The topic was truth and power in modern media. But no one expected what came next. She began calmly, "They said I didn't deserve the mic. That I hadn't earned the title. That I was just loud." Then she paused. Looked directly into the camera. "Let me be loud, for everyone who was told to shrink." The audience leaned forward. Phones came out. TikTok started recording. She continued. "I was mocked for my credentials by someone who reads off a teleprompter. I was questioned by a man whose greatest legal achievement is, what? Being loud while wrong?" Laughter rippled through the auditorium. But Jasmine wasn't joking. "I didn't come here to be tolerated. I came here because I earned it. Court by court. Bill by bill. Case by case." Behind her, a screen displayed headlines from Pete's show. "Crockett Too Angry. Unhinged Lawmaker Snaps. Overhyped and Underqualified." She turned to the screen. "This isn't critique. It's erasure in disguise." And then she dropped the line that would dominate every media cycle for the next week. If Pete Hegseth had to live one day as the woman he mocks, he wouldn't last 5 minutes without crying behind a flag. Gasps. Cheers. Standing ovation. Twitter exploded. Pete tried to respond 2 days later with a watered-down op-ed in a small outlet. But the damage was done. His credibility wasn't just bruised, it was gone. And Jasmine? She didn't need to clap back anymore. She stood taller, quieter, stronger, because when you walk through fire with truth, you don't come out burned. You come out unstoppable. It was the image that told the story. Jasmine Crockett, seated calmly on a Sunday morning panel, legs crossed, eyes steady, while across the split screen, Pete Hegseth looked down at his notes, visibly unsettled. The moderator posed the question. Congresswoman Crockett, Pete Hegseth recently said your critiques have become personal. Your thoughts? Jasmine didn't blink. My thoughts, she said. My resume was mocked on national television. My voice was called too much. My background, dismissed. And now that I responded, it's personal. She turned toward the camera with pinpoint focus. No. What's personal is what happens to people who look like me when we stay quiet. The panel froze. And then she added, calm, surgical, final. Pete started a fire. I just refuse to burn in it. That clip went viral in under an hour. By evening, her quote was on t-shirts, protest signs, Instagram stories, and think pieces. Colleges invited her. Law schools cited her. Late-night hosts quoted her. Even politicians who once kept their distance started name-dropping her, in admiration. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth's ratings slipped. Not catastrophically. Just enough to matter. Just enough that producers started reshuffling segments. He was no longer the culture warrior. He was the cautionary tale. And Jasmine? She walked into Congress the next day wearing a pin that read, earned. Not given. A journalist asked if she had any final words on the saga with Hegseth. She smiled. It's over. And I'm already working on what's next. No vengeance. No echo. Just elevation. Because this was never about a Fox News anchor. It was about a woman who turned dismissal into dominance, slander into spotlight, and one brutal question into a national awakening. And when history writes it down, it won't mention Pete's jab. It'll remember Jasmine's rise. So what did we just witness? Not just a battle of words, but a battle of weight. Not just a clash between a loud TV personality and a poised congresswoman. But a full display of what happens when facts meet fire and arrogance meets earned authority. Pete Hegseth underestimated her. He thought volume could drown out value. He thought slick suits and studio lights could outshine courtroom victories and lived experience. But Jasmine Crockett didn't need to shout. She didn't need to insult. All she needed was the truth, and 60 seconds. She didn't just defend her credentials. She redefined what it means to hold power and still be questioned. She turned a cheap shot into a national reckoning. And the lesson? When you come for someone who built her voice in silence. Who earned her seat with scars, not sponsors. Be ready. Because Jasmine Crockett doesn't argue to win headlines. She speaks to rewrite them. And in this moment, she didn't just shut Pete Hegseth down. She reminded America who the mic really belongs to.